Imagine 11th century India. An invading army of Central Asian cavalry is galloping across the plains, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. But traveling inside that very same camp is a historical paradox. Riding together are a king and a scholar. One is here to break a civilization open and empty its vaults. The other is here to study it, piece by piece, and save its ideas. The king is Mahmud of Ghazni. We often picture historical invaders as conquerors, looking to redraw the map and stick their flag in the ground. But Mahmud had absolutely no intention of governing India. His eyes were locked on two specific prizes: the immense funding required to build up his own empire back in present-day Afghanistan, and the prestige that came from tearing down the religious monuments of his rivals. He operated less like an occupying emperor and more like a highly organized thief. He broke in, took the golden jewels, and left the house before anyone could change the locks. To pull this off, Central Asian forces utilized geographic choke points like the Khyber Pass. These treacherous, narrow mountain corridors acted as a funnel, dropping his armies directly onto the wealthy Indian plains. Between the years 1000 and 1027 CE, Mahmud launched 17 distinct, highly disciplined military campaigns into northwestern India. He didn't waste time trying to hold minor towns. His forces bypassed them entirely, marching straight for major trade hubs and massive temples that had accumulated centuries of golden offerings from devotees. These were not the typical border skirmishes local Rajput and Hindu Shahi rulers were used to dealing with. Mahmud relied on lightning-fast cavalry. The sheer speed of the attacks caused widespread panic, easily overwhelming local defensive alliances. By the time the dust settled, the local economy was devastated and the frontier defenses were broken. But because Mahmud's army always packed up and retreated to Ghazni, the weakened local dynasties were left intact to pick up the pieces. The absolute peak of this strategy arrived in 1025 CE. Mahmud aimed his forces at Gujarat, striking the Somnath Temple, one of the wealthiest religious centers on the entire subcontinent. The physical aftermath across the region was staggering. Religious idols were shattered, sprawling temple complexes were burned, and centuries-old trade routes were fractured. The enormous stockpiles of wealth held in these cities were loaded up and hauled out of the subcontinent entirely. Mahmud used the plunder to finance the construction of grand mosques and palaces in his capital. This was his legacy. He successfully extracted the riches and broke the regional powers, but his hit-and-run tactics guaranteed he would never actually govern the territories he bled dry. But embedded right in the middle of this marching army of destruction was a Persian polymath named al-Biruni. While Mahmud's generals were busy breaking down doors to find silver, al-Biruni was sitting down with the locals. He spent years mastering the Sanskrit language. His methodology was incredibly strict for the era. He refused to rely on biased second-hand translations. Instead, he demanded primary Indian texts and conversed directly with local scholars to compile his encyclopedic masterwork, Kitab-ul-Hind. He even translated Patanjali's complex text on advanced yoga, the Yoga Sutras, into Arabic. It was a massive undertaking that required a deep, genuine respect for Indian philosophy, executed right in the middle of an active war zone. Al-Biruni operated strictly as an objective observer. He was meticulously archiving and validating the intellectual worth of the exact same culture his employer was actively trying to pillage. Because of his proximity to the violence, al-Biruni's writings give us a primary source view of the immediate cultural fallout. He recorded that the chaos of the raids ruined the prosperity of the country, causing the local Hindu populations to be scattered, quote, like atoms of dust in all directions. But that fear triggered a powerful survival mechanism. Centers of Indian science, mathematics, and astronomy fled the vulnerable northwestern conflict zones, migrating towards safer havens like Kashmir in the north and Varanasi in the east. There, displaced scholars regrouped and rebuilt their educational networks. The stone walls that originally housed this knowledge were reduced to rubble, but the delicate manuscripts, the equations, and the philosophies survived. Mahmud's raids successfully destroyed the physical buildings of learning, But by scattering the scholars, he inadvertently forced that intellectual wealth to spread, guaranteeing it would survive and continue to thrive. All of this leaves us with a critical question about how we read history. Can we truly consider al-Biruni an impartial chronicler? After all, he was a Muslim outsider. More importantly, his salary was paid by the exact same king who was causing the trauma he was so carefully documenting. Yet, look at their final legacies. Mahmud of Ghazni exhausted his life chasing physical wealth, gold that was eventually melted down and lost to time. Al-Biruni chased intellectual wealth, observations and translations that scholars still rely on today. It proves that military defeat and physical destruction do not equal cultural erasure. As 11th century India shows us, if a society's knowledge is deeply rooted enough, it will easily outlast the armies that try to burn it down.